It's 7:18 a.m. You're standing in the kitchen, coffee going cold, scrolling your bank app before work. Six figures on paper, two incomes, good jobs, and yet your chest tightens when you see the balance. Later today, you'll sit in traffic. Again, you'll rush meetings, miss daylight, order takeout because nobody has energy left. And sometime around 9:47 p.m., when the house finally goes quiet, you'll do that dangerous thing. You'll open Zillow or Amazon or your credit card app just to check. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You did everything right. You got the degree, you climbed the ladder, you added the second income, you followed the formula you were promised would lead to comfort. And yet somehow, you feel more financially fragile now than you did years ago. Here's the paradox. Two incomes were supposed to mean margin, security, options. Instead, they feel like a treadmill that never slows down. What if I told you that for millions of households, the second income barely counts at all? Not emotionally, not spiritually, mathematically. What if I told you that a $58,000 second income can quietly shrink down to about $2 an hour? Not because you're irresponsible, not because you overspend, but because the system skims it away before you ever feel it. And once you see where that money actually goes, you can't unsee it. If you've ever wondered why your household makes good money but still feels one emergency away from panic, stay with me. Because the number at the end of this story will change how you see your income forever. My name is Mark, and I spend an unhealthy amount of time pulling apart personal finance math that looks obvious until you actually follow the money. Here's the thing we've all been told, that two incomes are the safest possible financial setup, that adding another salary automatically means more stability, more savings, more breathing room. It sounds mathematically obvious. More money in should mean more money left over. And if you're feeling stressed with two incomes, the quiet assumption is that something must be wrong with how you're managing it. Except that's not what the data shows. When you look at real households with real jobs, real commutes, real kids, and real exhaustion, the math starts to break. The second income doesn't stack neatly on top of the first. It gets chewed up by costs that don't show up on pay stubs, by decisions that feel reasonable in isolation, by a system that quietly reprices your entire life the moment you add that second salary. And once that happens, going back becomes almost impossible. That's where the trap starts. To understand how we got here, we need to rewind a bit. For most of modern history, households were built around one primary income, not because people were lazy or traditional, but because the system itself was structured that way. Housing costs assumed one commute. Childcare was often informal or family-based. Jobs were geographically anchored, but expectations were lower. You could leave work and actually be done. Then, over time, something changed. More households needed two incomes to maintain the same standard of living, not to upgrade, just to stay put. And as two-income households became normal, markets adjusted. Housing didn't just get more expensive, it got bid up to what two incomes could tolerate. Childcare didn't just become common, it became industrialized. Commutes stretched farther, work hours blurred, time itself became a scarce resource you had to buy back with money. Fast forward to today, the second income isn't entering a neutral system. It's entering a system already calibrated to extract it. And here's the part most people miss. The problem isn't that costs went up evenly, it's that they clustered around the second income. The first income covers the basics. The second income gets assigned all the support costs that make modern life function. And that's where it gets really interesting, because once you see how those costs attach themselves, you realize the second income isn't additive, it's sacrificial. Let me show you how. Let me introduce you to David and Sarah. David is 38, Sarah is 36. They have two kids, both under 10. David works in tech operations. Sarah works in healthcare administration. Together, they bring in about $155,000 a year. On paper, they're doing great. In reality, they feel constantly behind. Let's start with the first hidden cost. I call this one the commute tax. David drives 45 minutes each way. Sarah drives a little less, but still far enough that remote work isn't an option. That's not just gas, it's wear on the car, it's insurance adjusted for mileage, it's parking, it's the silent cost of time. By the end of the year, David has spent the equivalent of weeks of his life just getting to work. That time doesn't show up anywhere, but it's gone. And that's just the warm-up, because the second cost hits harder. This is the childcare surcharge, not childcare as a choice, childcare as a requirement. daycare, after-school programs, summer coverage, all designed around two working parents with zero flexibility. Sarah's entire workday exists inside a narrow window defined by pickup times and penalties. And here's the brutal truth. If Sarah didn't work, most of this cost would disappear. But because she does, a massive portion of her income is already spoken for. That money doesn't feel like it belongs to them. It passes through their account like a toll booth. And we're not done. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. The third cost is what I call the exhaustion premium. So when both adults work full-time, time becomes the most expensive thing in the house. Cooking gets outsourced, cleaning gets delayed or paid for, convenience replaces intention. Groceries turn into delivery, simple meals turn into takeout, weekends turn into recovery periods instead of planning sessions. None of this feels reckless, it feels necessary, but it's expensive and it compounds. Because when you're tired, you don't optimize, you cope, and coping is costly. Now you might be thinking, okay, but they're still making good money. You're right. But here's the part nobody talks about. The second income doesn't just add costs, it prices their entire life upward. This is the lifestyle recalibration effect. Their house isn't sized for one income anymore. Their location isn't chosen for flexibility. Their schedule assumes constant motion. Every major decision quietly assumes two incomes will always be there, which means the second income isn't optional. It's required to keep the machine running. And that's when the trap snaps shut. Because once a household is built around two incomes, losing one doesn't just reduce comfort, it threatens survival. But we're still not at the worst part. There's one more cost, the one nobody calculates, the risk concentration cost. Two incomes feel safer until you realize both depend on the same fragile system, same economy, same childcare schedule, same health insurance, same commute infrastructure. If something breaks, it doesn't break halfway, it breaks everything at once, and that stress changes behavior. You save less because cash flow feels tight. You take fewer risks because failure feels catastrophic. You stay in jobs you hate because the household can't absorb a shock. At this point, David and Sarah aren't building wealth. They're maintaining equilibrium. And here's the re-hook. When you add all of this together, the second income starts to look less like extra money and more like the glue holding a fragile structure together. Which raises a terrifying question. What is that second income actually worth? Because the number you're about to see isn't what you think. And when you translate it into time, it's worse. So let's finally answer the question we've been circling this entire time. What is Sarah's second income actually worth? Not emotionally, not symbolically, mathematically. When you account for taxes taking a third before the money even lands, for childcare swallowing the hours she works to pay for it, for the commute that turns paid hours into unpaid ones, for the exhaustion spending that only exists because time is gone, and for the lifestyle repricing that locks every bill to two incomes. Sarah's $58,000 salary collapses, not to zero, to something far more insulting. After everything is accounted for, Sarah is effectively working for about $2 an hour. $2, less than a teenager at a drive-thru, less than the babysitter they pay to make her job possible. That's not a mistake. That's not mismanagement. That's the second income trap. You were sold the idea that a second income adds security. In reality, it often becomes the most expensive income you'll ever earn. Let that sink in. So why didn't David and Sarah see this coming? Why don't you see it coming? Because your brain does something sneaky with big numbers. You see the headline salary, the gross income, the prestige of we both work, and your brain treats that number as real. But your brain is terrible at subtracting invisible costs, especially costs that arrive in pieces. Gas here, childcare there, a little convenience spending everywhere. None of it feels connected. So you don't evaluate the second income as a single decision. You experience it as 100 small, reasonable ones. You take the job, then you need childcare, then you need a closer house, then you need a second car, then you're too tired to cook, then you treat yourself because life feels hard. Each step makes sense, but together they form a cascade. You don't build a life around your net income. You build it around the idea of your income. And once that life is built, backing out feels impossible. Because leaving the second income doesn't just mean less money, it means renegotiating your entire existence. That's why this trap is so powerful. and why it's not your fault. You didn't fall into this because you're bad with money. You fell into it because the costs were hidden, delayed, and socially normalized. Everyone around you was doing the same thing, and everyone around you feels the same quiet pressure.
So, how did we end up in a world where working more can make you feel poorer?
It wasn't a conspiracy, it was incentives. When two incomes became normal, markets adjusted upward. Housing didn't care who paid the mortgage, it only cared what households could afford.
Childcare didn't care why parents needed it. It only cared that demand was guaranteed. Employers didn't care about household stress. They cared about output.
So the system optimized itself around maximum participation, like an audience standing up to see better. Everyone followed the same logic, individually rational, collectively destructive. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The system isn't designed for you to feel wealthy, it's designed to keep you productive. Every ad, every expectation, every subtle pressure to just add more income, it all keeps the machine fed. The second income doesn't buy freedom, it often buys compliance. And once you see that, the anger you feel is justified, not to make you depressed, to make you alert, because traps only work when you don't know you're in one. Now you might be thinking, okay, great, what am I supposed to do? Just quit? And no, that's exactly the wrong takeaway. This isn't about one person staying home or both people working, it's about how you evaluate income. Here's the mindset shift that changes everything. I call it the real hourly wage lens. Instead of asking, how much does this job pay? You ask, what does this job leave? Not per year, per hour of life it consumes. This lens changes decisions fast. It might mean one partner works fewer hours, or negotiates flexibility instead of salary, or takes a lower paying role that collapses half the hidden costs. It might mean shrinking housing to buy back time, or restructuring childcare, or deliberately choosing friction now to remove it later. None of this is easy. But here's the payoff. When your household stops depending on the second income to survive, something incredible happens. Stress drops, optionality returns, savings actually stick. The goal isn't one income or two. The goal is resilience now. So here's your action step. This weekend, calculate your real hourly wage. Not just taxes, all of it, commute, childcare, convenience spending, time. Write the number down. Because once you see it, your future decisions will change automatically. The households that actually win aren't the ones with the biggest incomes. They're the ones who understand which income is real. You can work harder your entire life and still feel trapped, but you can't escape a trap you don't know you're in. Now you do. If this changed how you see your household income, send it to the person you share that income with. And I want to know your number. What does your work actually pay per hour of life? Once you see this math, you can't unsee it.